theory has to have a priority.
Capitalism and artificial intelligence are the same thing.
The dimension of the future has disappeared.
There is actually no representation anymore.
There is no final resolution to contradiction.
Militant proletarian snake handling over abysses never gets much wilder than this.
All right, everybody, welcome back to The Dangerous Maybe. And today, Nance and I are joined by Dimitri Crooijmans. We are super excited to have him here. He is a young Žižekian who is developing Žižekian theory and doing some really cool work over at Philosophy Portal. And we are here today to have a conversation primarily about this right here, and in particular, the very concept of the parallax view, which is a core Žižekian concept. So thank you for being here, Dimitri. But before we get into the conversation, Nance, what is up with you?
I'm chilling, man. Just the world is a mad place. Lots of things are going on. You got Obama and Trump talking about aliens. Trump just stole $10 billion and embezzled it into his private NGO. Tariffs are going up 10%, not to mention the Epstein files. Also, there's still wars and genocides and all the human horrors that kind of are always going on in the background. And these are kind of the background conditions for the world we live in today. And they're the background conditions of us being able to have cool conversations and stuff like that. So you have to take it with a grain of salt. The world is a maddening place, but it's also a place where we have freedoms and we're able to do shit like this. And I feel like resisting the temptation to cave in to the dark and just like, I kind of want to curl up in a ball and just like shiver with like agony. But no, like we get to do shit like this. We get to think. We get to come together and rejoice in the spirit of things that we do not know, things that we cannot know, and that's spiritually refreshing. So I'm happy to be able to do this shit. I love doing this shit, and I'm stoked to be talking to Dimitri, man. Like it's awesome to have you here.
Yeah, hell yeah. So okay, I think we should start off, Dimitri. I think you should tell people about your work. You've been doing some really great theory this last year or so. I've been reading your posts, and you're doing something cool at Philosophy Portal. You have a YouTube channel called Actual Spirit, which this discussion is going to be based on. I believe it's your most recent video called Introduction to Slavoj Žižek's Parallax View. So yeah, Dimitri, just introduce yourself and tell people about your work.
Yeah, so Nance, I think your beginning was right. Like we are in a state of war, and I've been reading recently Žižek's Metastasis of Enjoyment. And if I would say the one thing that I learned from that book is that peace is always a secondary fiction. So really, like truth is always grounded in warlike experiences. And to me, my coming to be as a philosopher, I always point to 2016. And not only the election of Trump, but also Bernie versus Trump. I was following that, which is very weird because I was a 16-year-old Dutch boy, didn't have anything to do with American politics. But, it's a big theatrical spectacle. So I was watching how that went down. And as soon as Trump got elected, I was like, whoa, that's like everyone. I was shocked. I was shocked. So that really brought me into leftist politics. And yeah, now I'm 26, so it's 10 years ago. And I would say, to cut a long story short, I went from Noam Chomsky to Marxism. And then, of course, I encountered Žižek quite quickly. But I had no means to really work with what Žižek was doing, right? Like German idealism, psychoanalysis, it was all very vague to me. But this term that Žižek used to describe his own philosophy with, which is dialectical materialism, I thought that was it. Like, because that was the way that Lenin described, or no, maybe Lenin didn't do that overtly, but at least Stalin and Mao described themselves as dialectical materialists. I know Engels used that term too. So yeah, about my work. Well, yeah, I have a YouTube channel and I don't really post that often. My whatever I post is always in line with whatever project I'm working on. So I've also articles on Substack, and yeah, I've explored many things, going from spirituality to art to Plato, modern philosophy, Descartes, Spinoza, and I would say that really the first philosopher that I read that tore my world apart was Immanuel Kant, but it was the Immanuel Kant that Roger Scruton introduced to me. So I read this secondary literature of Roger Scruton, Introduction to Immanuel Kant, and I thought after that, and like getting to know this transcendental apperception of Kant, I thought, okay, this is it. Like, you can't really go further than this. But then this Žižek dude kept on going on about Hegel and Marx, and I wanted to understand what's really going on there. So as a teenager, I started reading Stalin and Mao and taking their philosophy very seriously, actually. So yeah, if there's a current in my thinking, it's that I really wanted to understand dialectical materialism, and Žižek's Parallax view is really the book by Žižek to read if you want to understand what dialectical materialism means. So yeah, at Philosophy Portal, I've been there for years now. First as a student, now I'm also running the Slovenian school reading group. We've gone into Mladen Dolar, Alenka Zupancic. This year is dedicated to Žižek and the Parallax view. And yeah, I mean, these core, like, I definitely want to have said that I would not have been who I am today without Cadell and without his work and without Philosophy Portal.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I'm super grateful for that, to be a collaborator with him and for the work that he's doing, because who really takes the time to not only read Hegel, but to like read Hegel together and have a course about it, and then multiple courses, and then also have a course about Nietzsche and about Lacan. So yeah, like I did try to read Hegel before I encountered Cadell, and also yeah, when we started talking, I tried to read Hegel, but it was really in 2022 when we had the first Philosophy Portal course on the phenomenology of spirit that I was like, okay, there's no excuses I can make anymore. Like, I have a teacher now, I have other people who are in this process, and that really anchored me in my philosophical becoming. So yeah, that's been 4 years ago, and ever since I've never left, because Cadell has this talent to not disappoint, right? Like,
Right.
he keeps bringing out consistent, high quality stuff. And so I had to keep looking at it, and I had to keep interacting and thinking through it. So yeah, I've not really been in academia. I've actually just started a bachelor in linguistics, so I've finished one semester. But it's kind of strange, right? Because usually young people get into academia quite early, like when they're 18 or 20 maybe. And then later on, they might encounter Žižek through the internet or whatever, through academia. But for me, Žižek's philosophy as an ethico-political stance, as a political intervention, I took that to heart, because I really also wanted, like, because I was so hysterical with the whole communist and leftist project that I was seeing in my daily life, and also the the prevalence or the unholy alliance of psychiatry, feminism, and neoliberal ideology, to put it in a short way. And I thought all of this is like wrong, and Žižek really is trying to think through that. So even though it took me years to see, okay, how am I going to tackle this now I do feel like I have a good grasp to practice dialectical materialism, which I really think that Žižek's philosophy is about. It's not about saying, well, Žižek is the best philosopher, he's read the most difficult stuff, and he's bringing it together in the most unique and creative way. I mean, that might all be true, who's to say, but it's really the truth of Žižek is what we do with Žižek. And I think it's many of us readers of Žižek are hystericized by Žižek, but the question is like, what are we gonna do with this, right? With what you just said, Nance, like the background that you just gave, like we're in a state of war. Like Europe is literally in a war with Russia, but the only reason that Europe is not in war with Russia is because we don't see ourselves as being in war with Russia. But there is like Russian warships going into Dutch waters, and we don't shoot them because then the Americans would get very angry. And so I mean, the Turkish people, for example, they don't care if like a Russian fighter jet goes through Turkish airspace. Within 5 minutes, it'll get shot down, right? So Erdogan had this. Is a despicable man, of course, but he had this funny comment after this Davos thing happened that, oh, look, now you can see finally Western people are waking up to the reality of geopolitics. So this reality of geopolitical war is always happening, but it seems that now we are increasingly unable to live in the fiction that we are not in a state of war. So this will become increasingly the case with Russia as well, and this is one of the political worries of mine. But so we could get into that. But this is what Žižek's philosophy is for to me, to think this whole mess. Yeah.
And that's the thing. I think look, I know you'll agree. The problem with a lot of people who think they know what Žižek is about is their understanding of Žižek is always based on interviews that they watch of his on YouTube. And that's as far as they go with Žižek, and they don't read the books. They don't know what's tucked away inside of Sublime Object and Plague of Fantasies and Parallax View. And everybody I know who is very serious about Žižek as a philosopher, their Žižek is always text-based. And that's exactly what you're doing this year at Philosophy Portal, reading Parallax View closely. And it's I'll be honest, it's hard for me when somebody starts being dismissive of Žižek's work. Oh, well, he says this in this Substack article, or he says this in an interview, or his political takes, in these articles he writes. And it's just like, yeah, okay. I mean, like, I don't agree with everything he says in that stuff either, but that's not who Slavoj Žižek is to me. And I always have to tell him, Slavoj Žižek to me is sublime object of ideology, tearing with the negative metastases of enjoyment. And very few people are well versed in those texts. And what I love about what you're doing is, I see you as this younger, new, fresh generation of Žižekian thinker who is based in the text. And I just have immense respect for that. And and I think it's important because Slavoj, and I'll be honest, I think sometimes he does himself a disservice. He doesn't tend to bring as much of his theory into conversations and into articles where I'll see him talk about something. I'm like, well, why didn't you bring up Parallax View? Why didn't you bring up? And I know he does this to try to make it more accessible to people, but other theorists have a way of using this to be like, oh, this is, there's nothing here. It's just, commentary. And it's like, I think Slavoj is one of the most important philosophical minds we have. And I think you have to go through the books to get that, though. And so these concepts that he uses, though, I mean, they've fundamentally changed my life. And Nance and I, in our own way, we're very focused on his concept of superego. And yeah, I say his concept because if all we had was what Freud and Lacan said about it, we wouldn't be doing what we're doing with superego. And so, yeah, I see how there's so many ways to develop these concepts that he's made. You can develop them so much further than he did. And that's what's so exciting when you get into Žižekian theories. You're like, holy shit, he did this amazing thing, but I can see, 15 ways I can take this and run with it. And that's what I'm seeing you're doing here, laying this foundation with the concept of the parallax view. So I think we start with the simplest of questions. Dimitri, what does Slavoj Žižek mean by the parallax view?
Yeah, so of course we have to go through a detour here. What does the big other mean when the big other says
Sure.
parallax view?
Because
But what normal
it's a
people
common
call-
term. We were just talking, there's a
Yeah.
movie called The Parallax View. So the term itself
Yeah.
isn't something he coined. So good point.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that the way the big other looks at a term, that's called its definition. So the definition of the parallax would be that depending on what perspective we take in relationship to an object, it looks different to us. So, for example, if there's like 3 squares and one is red and one is white and one is blue, and Nance and you, Mikey, we're standing like across these squares, and there's a light in between the squares. Like from your vantage point, it would look as if the light was superimposed on the red square, whereas, for example, for me, it would look as if the light is imposed on the blue square. So basically, the term is like whatever perspective we take, objectivity itself looks different. Now, then Žižek adds that this objectivity itself is a fantasy. So it's the point for Žižek's parallax is not to get behind our perspectives, to get through to the true objectivity, like what's really happening. But no, it's not only that, the picture is in me or the picture is in you, and we have our own subjective ways of perceiving it, but each of us also is in the picture itself, to paraphrase Lacan. So
Yeah.
what this means is that the subject is implicated in its objectivity. So the parallax gap, he will call it a parallax gap, is the fact that there's no objectivity that we can get to, so that we can reconcile our perspectives in like a grand unified whole, like a grand unified theory, right? So also the way that we think each other's perspectives is falls back on our own perspective, right? So we're dealing with an inherent partiality of the subject implicated in its objectivity. That's how I would say Žižek, what Žižek's parallax view is. Yeah.
And so that's really good. So I think it's interesting though, right? Because somebody would say, okay, so you have these two perspectives, and I don't think Slavoj uses the term perspectivism. He prefers parallax view, but if we're being charitable and flexible here, they're similar. Now, I don't know, would you make a distinction between a parallax view and a perspective?
Would I make a distinction? Well, I would say that the parallax gap, I would start with the parallax gap and say that the parallax gap is a singular negativity, whereas perspectives are multiple, right? Like each one of us has their perspectives, but the multiplicity for Žižek is grounded in the negativity of the parallax gap. So yeah, this is the way that the parallax works according to this idea that there's no prior one, there's just the cut in the one, the difference of the one to itself, and from this stems multiplicity. So yeah, is Žižek a perspectivism? I would be hesitant to say that, because I think that really gets to Žižek's critique of Nietzsche, and Nietzsche is a lot of times called a perspectivist, right?
Yeah.
So Nietzsche Nietzsche will say things like, how beautiful is it that we forget, so that we get to enjoy beauty and such things, right? So what are we forgetting there? We're forgetting perhaps like pain and suffering and war of these things. There's a beauty to the obfuscation and to to obscuring negativity with fiction. But then what Nietzsche gets stuck at a certain point, because I don't think Nietzsche can really see the singular negativity that grounds whatever perspective you take. And I think really the logical end conclusion of this you get in Deleuze, unfortunately. Like, I love Deleuze, I don't want to shit on Deleuze. I think he's has a lot of great made a lot of great stuff, but yeah, he'll fall into, like, for in the end of his life, he's written these like Spinozist papers, and it's like orgiastic poetry, and he's just like enjoying perspectives and the difference and the perspectival shifts. But I think something like this really obfuscates the negativity. So yeah, it's
That's a
I mean
good
it's
point.
it's a good question. Yeah,
So tell me
it's a
how
good
you think,
question.
because here's how I kind of think about this thing, where I think what you're talking about with perspectivism is, it's, on the one hand, it's rooted in privileging difference, whereas
Yeah,
parallax privileges contradiction or antagonism. Uh, and so
yeah,
there's that dimension of it. I think the other thing to get at here, and this is where the Žižekian twist, I always like to put it like that, because this is what he's doing with his form of dialectics. But the way I view it is, he would say something like this. Okay, so this example that you used it in your video as well. Um, the red and the blue, depending on what perspective you're at. So somebody could go, well, you've just got two perspectives. They see things differently. There's no way to reconcile them. And because of that, there's no real objectivity. Now, I think here's the Žižekian twist. Yeah, that's right. But the very fact that you can never get a final neutral resolution, that's the hard kernel of objective reality. Like, that is the objective, is the contradiction itself between these different sides of the parallax view. And I think that's another way, because people will say, well, he says he's a materialist, but he seems to like focus on the negative a lot. Isn't materiality positive, actuality? And for him, like, because he's using this Lacanian definition of the real, and he's using Lacanian Hegelian negativity, what's most objective, what is the most stubborn dimension of reality, are these negative points of contradiction or antagonism. And I think his concept of parallax view was his way of trying to, because up to this point, remember that less than nothing hasn't been written yet. This is his most, large scale systematic project. I mean, the parallax view book. And I think this is where he's really trying to say, look, here's what I'm doing. And so, with all that being said, this term that you emphasize, I think, really gets at this Žižekian concept of objectivity, if we're using the term the way I'm using it, which is the self-repelling one. Could you talk a little bit about that?
yeah. So connected to what you just said about the if a person would say, well, then there is no objectivity, there's just a difference in our perspectives. The problem with that is that Žižek says very precisely in the parallax view that the parallax gap, there's a cause of the parallax gap, and the cause of the parallax gap is object A. And then he continues to say that object A is the pure parallax object, right? So he wrote the parallax view after he wrote ticklish subject. So it's a kind of the objectal counterpart to the ticklish subject is the parallax view.
Mm-hmm.
You can think about the Lacanian diagram, with the Bart subject and then the object A. This would be these two books, smashed together. So it's a very weird thing, right? To say, okay, there's then parallax gap, but then the cause of this parallax gap is an object. So in a way, there's like an objectivity prior to negativity. Is that what he's saying? in a way that doesn't sound right, because aren't you then back to this neutral, positive basis of reality, which you just said is like just a priori excluded because of the difference that stems, from which stem all differences. And so what you just said is very important. So if someone would posit, okay, there is no objectivity, well, in his self-positing, he would continue to posit objectivity anyway, right? He would not cease to desire. So he would not cease to have an obstacle confronting him. He would not cease to be frustrated. He would not cease to have something be opposed to him and something resisting him. And this is the nature of objectivity as object A. So not as substantial, like hard, like something hard and rigid that like can finally stabilize the instability of meaning and speech, but really the opposite. Like, so whatever disturbs speech, whatever disturbs meaning, whenever I say, okay, there's no objectivity, and then I continue to live my life as if there is objectivity, this shows like, okay, but what is so it's this perspective is not neutral. That's the problem. It claims of itself, oh, it's neutral, there's no objectivity anyway, but then it continues to go on desiring. So because the subject is a desiring subject, right? So yeah, this is I take that to be so fundamental that and here I draw out the difference between dialectical idealism and dialectical materialism. But before I go ahead of myself, let's get back to the self-repelling one. So yeah, another way we can formulate the parallax gap is as the self-repelling one. And here, Žižek is really talking within the great philosophical tradition, right? Stemming also from Plato, like the concept of the one. And so yeah, like, or we could even go with Mao Zedong, you know, like on contradiction. Yesterday I was talking with a Chinese person, and Mao's on contradiction. So the term contradiction in Chinese is two characters, and one of the characters is a sword and the other is a shield. So it's literally like two positive entities clashing. And if you read On Contradiction by Mao, in which Mao talks about being a dialectical materialist and how great that philosophy is, he talks about two positive entities clashing into eternity. So, and the big Maoist slogan is one turns into two, or like one splits into two, right? And Žižek wants to get rid of this. So there is no one that inheres in any way whatsoever. There's not a metaphysical Platonist one or like a Neoplatonist one. There's also not like just like any positive self-identical thing that then splits into two, from which then conflict starts. But no, whenever we posit an identity that's self-identical to itself, the truth of that we'll see in its disturbance, we'll see also in the obstacle that makes it impossible for itself to be itself. So that is how I would say what the self-repelling one is. And yeah, so the positive materiality, I think that's a good way to put it. This positive materiality, that you're talking about, that is really what I take to be the Žižekian trick. So in the history of philosophy, we get idealism, Platonism, or Aristotelianism, and then we get at the end we get Hegel saying that all philosophy is idealism, is about the notion of this absolute and pure one, so to say, which for Hegel ultimately is, you can say absolute idea or absolute spirit, but it's something like that anyhow. But then in the 19th century, we get this denigration, the big denigration of philosophy. We get Feuerbach saying, no, Hegel, it's not about theology. Theology just mirrors anthropology. So whatever idealists or idealism thinks it's doing, it doesn't know that there's a positive materiality which simply subsists and which is trying to get out of, right? You're just projecting God to not think through the essence of man, to speak in a Feuerbachian sense. And there's a truth to this. But I think Žižek is kind of denigrating naive materialism itself, not by saying let's go back to idealism. I think it's very important for Žižek that we do not go back to idealism. But yeah, materialism is, in a way, it's too idealistic, because the positive materiality is actually fantasy. It's not that this positive materiality is a fantasy, like we could have many fantasies, but fantasy itself, I would say, yeah, appears as maybe too, I don't know, like the fantasy itself is a positive materiality to the subject, right? So this is because for Žižek, it's fantasy that tells you how to desire, right? The big other things about fantasy is that, oh, we desire a fantasy. For Žižek, it's the other way around. It's that we get fantasy because we don't know what we want. We get fantasy so that we get to desire. So this is really what we have to dismantle. We have to dismantle the positive materiality of fantasy, and that's what dialectical materialism does.
That's great. Yeah, I mean, you know how influenced I am by Todd McGowan, and you know, I love this thing where he talks about the Hegelian absolute as a hold whole. HOLED space WHOLE, hold whole. And what a lot of people tend to do with the Hegelian absolute is just act like it's a pure, positive, harmonious whole. Like they understand, oh, well, yeah, of course there's contradictions that are being worked through, but once you reach absolute knowing, once you reach absolute spirit, or the absolute idea, all these contradictions are neutralized and the whole thing is a seamless whole. And Todd's like, no, the whole point of Hegel is to get to the point where you see that everything, to switch back to terminology, everything's a self-propelling one. The whole itself is a self-propelling one. And the constitutive parts of the whole are self-propelling ones. And so this is, this is an anti-Aristotelian metaphysics. It's rejecting the classic concept of substance, that there's this independent thing that is what it is in and of itself without any internal contradictions. And the Žižekian emphasis on Hegel is to say, no, that the idea of substance is the work of fantasy. And so I love how you articulated that. And the point is, look, one of the ways, because there's lots of ways we can talk about ideology, but one of the ways to talk about it is this kind of this way of saying, oh, well, ideology just makes things appear as the way they have to be. This is just, it is what it is, and it can't be changed. And the power of seeing that things are internally contradictory is to say things are not just what they are also what they are not. And that means that these things are not fixed once and for all. So I think that's the power of a moment, or the power of Žižekian theory in a moment like ours, where we feel like everything is fixed, nothing can be changed. This is what the feeling that Mark Fisher was dealing with capitalist realism. It feels like there's no alternative. And to kick into this Žižekian perspective where we start attuning ourselves to the parallax gaps within political institutions, within subjectivity, within existing ways of life, is to open ourselves up to the fact that things are not finished once and for all. And it's almost like this is a moment of an excessive power of fantasy, just saying this is what it is. Things are all they are here. And the parallax gap is a counter movement to that. So yeah, I this is why I think it's so relevant. Nance, what are you thinking?
A couple things. First of all, we never have a neutral relationship with reality. I love that statement. Because we don't. We perceive the world and we chop it up into perceptible bits, and then we perform this magical operation, and then we spit the world back out anew, and we have no choice but to take that representation of the world for the world, but focusing on how we are always implicated in the world, I think gives us freedom, and it can tend to sound like philosophical mumbo jumbo, to say that, like, you're always implicated in the world, you're always making the world anew. But when you start to talk about the contingency of the world, and you start to talk about politics in this way, and you start to realize, oh, this is not just is it Plato? And I really love the fact that that it is, I don't want to say anti-Platonic, but it's taking this idea of the one and saying, no, the one is not the one. The one is in fact the not one. And I love that. And I think that is this moment of freedom. And it's not to just point to how you're staining reality, like how you are casting reality, and how there is no such thing as reality without you, because that, I think, can tend to draw one into like a solipsism. It's really to demonstrate the contingency and give us back our agency, and kind of show us like how and where and why you can be empowered, so that when we're facing global war, we don't just give up, and we don't just say, oh, I like theory, I like to read, I like to think, so I'm going to go fuck off and do it in a cabin. Like it implicates us, and it shows us that we're all always already guilty. And not guilty in a moralist kind of way, but guilty in like, no, we're complicit. We're complicit in the world, and we have agency, and it might be minuscule agency. But it's more than nothing. And I don't know, I like that. And I think it's, I don't know, powerful. And I think it is very contemporary. I think right now we are living through a moment of desperation. And it's funny. It's like, no, Žižek isn't just a sloppy guy who likes hot dogs. Like, he really is doing philosophy, but the result of that philosophy is to show us we are emancipated, we are free, we have the ability to move, and I think that's important. I think that's like the culmination, in a way, of like what modernity gave us, was the ability to move, and certain freedoms and agencies and stuff like that. And I think it does cash out in Žižek in a way. And I don't know, I guess for me, I'm reflecting on that, because I think I'm currently going through a period of feeling helpless and feeling like, what's the fucking point of anything? This is the point, like what you're doing with Parallax. I think it's pretty powerful, for me anyway.
So yeah, I think, look, I think there's a way we can add a layer of nuance and onto this concept by going into something that I know that I've thought about it a lot. I'm sure both of you have. I know you have, Nance. And yeah, this, Dimitri, this thing where Žižek's big on dialectics. You've already talked about dialectical materialism, but we're still living, we're haunted by the ghost of the concept of Hegelian dialectics as thesis, antithesis, synthesis. And that this is the threefold movement of the dialectic. And Žižek wants to remain a dialectician, but he's certainly not going to just go with this this standard. I like to just call it synthetic dialectics. He's going to go with a parallactic dialectics. Could you talk about the differences here and why you think that the Žižekian dialectic is this great advancement on the concept?
Yeah, so yeah, that's a good one, right? These it will always haunt us probably the rest of our lives. The
Yes.
synthesis, the synthesis.
go away.
Yeah. So I'll just use Hegel's system of sex, which is a Žižekian story. Žižek writes about the Hegel's system of sex in the parallax view, and so there's 3 moments. First, well, there's like the working up to the system of sex, but once you're in the system, in the encyclopedic motions, there's 3 moments. First, there's the sexual position from behind, like doggy style. That would be the thesis. But then there's the recoiling into yourself. Like, why would you even do such a thing? You can just be in your own bedroom, be with yourself, and masturbate, right? So that would be the antithesis, the negative moment of the dialectic. Yeah, like jittering. You can be like depressed and still enjoy masturbation. By the way, like this is the nature of jouissance. It's amazing. Talking about
Well, I think the
oppositions,
Gunnar
but-
accelerationists know a little bit about that.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, and okay, well, the grand synthesis, right? What's the third moment? What do we get? Do we get a resolved and a good sex life then? Well, for the Hegelian, the synthesizers, we would get the missionary position and everything would be reconciled because we can see her face and look, we can sustain our fantasy while going through the motions. The Žižekian synthesis is basically like, okay, actually, basically what we're doing now is we're both using each other to masturbate. So that's the synthesis. The synthesis is that there is no sexual relationship, guys. Like you're actually, now both of you are masturbating. Right? So that would be the difference. That would be the difference between the fusional one of like, finally like having it clicked in your sex life and somehow, you get the best sex or something, and then realizing that, oh, actually this is a masturbatory fantasy, and she might also have a masturbatory or he, who cares, might also have a masturbatory fantasy. And so yeah, I would say that's the difference. The sexuality and sex is not about connection. It's really this two people masturbating and the obstacle that always comes in between the parallax gear, the unease and the difficulty and these type of things. So
You know what
yeah,
I think is
that's-
important about that?
yeah.
So making this connection to the non-relation, and for people who don't know, this is a Lacanian concept. Lacan's dealing with this in his
Yeah.
later seminars. It kind of culminates in seminar 20. But what this essentially amounts to is that there is no built-in complementarity between
No.
desiring subjects. You don't click together like puzzle pieces. It's a rejection of basically the soulmate fantasy. And here's the thing, though, and this is why I love that you brought in the non-relation here, is it's a non-relation because it's not complementarity, but the relation can be based on the non-complementarity, where instead of viewing it as, oh, it's so tragic, there's no perfect relationship, there's no, divine connection between people.
Mhm.
No, it's on the basis of that lack that you can have a true bond with somebody. And so this is why I like the non-relation and the parallax view. I think both
Yeah.
of them get us to something, and this is where it's there in Slavoj, and I do think this is a moment where he's celebrating human freedom, but I think Todd McGowan kind of gets at this a bit with a bit more lucidity. And what I mean is, with the parallax gap, here's why I think it's different than perspectivism, like on the concrete human to human level. Perspectivism basically goes, you have your perspectives, I have my perspectives. There's nothing to do here. We'll agree to disagree. There's no bond to be forged. Just go your own way. Nick Land kind of has more of this view where it's like, okay, just exit, go away. There's no. But the parallax view, the point is, no, there is a point of objectivity both sides of the parallax reach, which is the fact that you cannot ever bridge it. But this is a universal lack we all share, and it's on the basis of it being an objective lack that we can forge meaningful bonds between each other on the basis of this. And the same goes with the non-relation. Instead of viewing them as these things that would just keep people separated and isolated from one another, in fact, these are the points of radical solidarity. And I think that's where you see this important connection between the parallax view, which is more of an epistemological kind of, I mean, yes, there's an ontological dimension to it, but this idea of like, oh, well, you know, we live in different realities is how people talk about it. And what they mean is, oh, my news sources and where I get my information is completely incompatible with yours, and therefore we have nothing to talk about. We can't relate. It's exactly on that point that you can relate. It's the relatable non-relation. And I think that's why it's important to emphasize this thing with parallax view is not just perspectivism. Perspectivism isolates and says, go your own way. The parallax view, though acknowledging the contradiction between two sides or three sides or four sides, it makes it possible to forge a bond on the basis of that antagonism. So I view it as a way to not deny antagonism, but to approach antagonism in a non-antagonistic way. And this is always this twist that Slavoj does. Same with the non-relation. Instead of the non-relation being this thing, oh, we're all trapped in solipsism. We're all isolated. We're all atoms that we're monads that can't actually touch. Yeah, but we can touch on the basis of not being able to touch. So
Yeah, I would like to add here that I really like that you brought up freedom and modernity. Of course, modernity is critiqued a lot today, and liberalism is critiqued a lot. Always these people who have the most to say about liberalism and modernity, usually, and to critique it, they don't know the least about it. But yeah, like if there's a modern concept of subjectivity that we get with Immanuel Kant, let's say, perhaps we could say that Žižek's philosophical innovation is that we get a modern concept of the object and object A. So yeah, there's definitely a freedom here, and I think we're in a way liberated from identity, right? A lot of people now want to, we want to cling to identity. For example, cling to ethno-nationalist identity or Robo-Cthulhu identity, or or even like a leftist identity, and saying this is the organization, this is the political party, this is the, like, look at our substance, look at how throbbing it is. And I think for Žižekians like us, like, Fichte said that philosophy is basically like an explication or an elaboration of someone's inherent style, something like that. I think like that that ethico-political stance of I would prefer not to, like, I don't want to identify. I actually, we might sometimes tell ourselves, I tell myself, like, oh no, I found my community, I found my thing. And then after a while, it's always like, I would prefer not to. This is not it, the hysteric saying, this is not it. But then what's the truth of this? Well, also in the introduction to the parallax view, Žižek says that philosophy happens in the interstices of communities. So a community would, for example, be like, let's say, the ethno-nationalist community, right? Like we're all white people, or maybe even like the third worldist community, like we're all brown people and we all hate the West, or something like that. The truth of these communities is the hysterics which will actually sever themselves from its perversion, because substance is perverted. It's substare literally means to be standing on its own, which is like self-serving, and subject is the inherent tension internal to substance, which is the truth of substance, actually. So the truth of, like, let's say, a perverted community is being the hysteric who cannot take it anymore. He's like, I have to get out. Like, it's over for me. I don't want to even constitute myself in speaking against people here. I don't, like, because then I would have to take up either an identity within it or an identity against it. And the hysteric is like saying, no, it's over for me. I'm not maybe I'm not a Christian, or I'm not an atheist, or I'm not a scientist. So yeah, what you get then is you get not only dialectical materialism, but you get Christian atheism, you get conservative communism, right? So you get these yeah, in a way I think you can identify as a Christian atheist, but that's not an identity that will, like, it's not an identity to establish a stable community on, based on a substance to like give everyone like some meaning to get after and to try to attain. No, it's really I think by that process of severing yourself from a perversion and like just yeah being hystericized that you get to the truth of this. And there's something I want to add here to um that process of being an hysteric who goes into community. Of course, there's the alternative would be self-isolation or the Landian exit. um Such things, I think, also like saying that there is no objectivity, or saying, oh, it's all just perspectives anyway, like you're not going to get to the truth. I would all qualify that as cynicism, right? And cynicism is really perhaps like fantasy, where it has the most strong, like where it has the strongest hold on you. Because what does the cynic do? I mean, I know many cynics from my own personal life, being inside institutions. What the cynic does is he'll go through the motions of whatever community. He'll speak and say whatever they want him or her to say. He'll do whatever he's told, but then he'll say, but actually deep down inside me, I actually disagree with it all. And I know they won't understand, but I'll not say this, but I'll keep my little freedom inside myself, and I'll just lie on the outside and be truthful on the inside. Well, this is the biggest lie ever, because the truth of an intention, or yeah, whatever, an idea is literally in the practice that you are always already enacting. So this is again the materialist side of Žižek. It's not really about uh, yeah, what you believe when you are in a perverted community. Is the fact that you're already going along with the motions of a perverted community. And here, a perverted community, it could be anything, right? Like I think, yeah, university is a good example, because I'm there, and it's not because I'm not here trying to discredit university and saying it's false, don't go into it. Like I'm going into it. I'm going into it, and at the same time, I'm yeah, I mean, I'm seeing that, people who want to excel at uni are bored, because it's like it should be accessible to everyone. And everyone means also people who don't give a shit and just want to paper and to get out, right? So there's all these ways that we are examined in uni that really that have nothing to do with developing our intellectual capacities. And this is what we hear on the internet, like, whatever we're doing, we can't allow ourselves to do this, because then why would we even uh, write? Why would we even make videos, right? So yeah, like the way that we're approaching theory is really an ethical, like we're all gathered in our ethical political stances, which are different for sure. They're different, but they're yeah, this interstices, like exploring the interstices of communities and exploring these parallactic gaps, instead of saying, oh, just fill in the gap, just like tick the box, multiple choice, tick the box. Or yeah, just like these, like you always get these tests where there's like an empty box and just fill in the word, like bridge the gap, like fill in the gap. That's always this kind of like imaginary yeah, you get to like place yourself in the reign of the big other. You get to have your own little spot and be effaced in it, because there's nothing to do with you. But yeah, so I'm very critical of uni. Sometimes I do wonder, why am I why am I here? But no, it's yeah, it's great to have this conversation with you guys, and think through these things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Before Nance, you got something?
I thinking about the non-relation in the parallax gap, and the non-relation, like not to just say there is no relation, there is no big other, there is nothing, there is no objectivity. Like it is a thing, and it can be a non-thing. I don't know, spark plugs work. Spark plugs make your engine run because there's a gap from the diode to the whatever. And because there is the gap, the material that is, positively charged or somewhat positively charged, the spark crosses the gap. And it's not that the spark is trying to negate itself in the the substance of the copper or the platinum or palladium, whatever the hell they use in those little diodes, but it's that it's drawn to the other. It's drawn to the other. I think there's a tendency that I think causes a lot of people some consternation. Žižek likes to talk about the quantum world and stuff like that, and it's fascinating for me. But I also understand that maybe for some people it doesn't matter, or it's doing philosophical mumbo jumbo. But I think that what you're saying is you're not taking up an identity in reference to or in antagonism with the community to which you already belong. Like, you're drawn to the other. So I think, yeah, it's romantic to want to talk about quantum mechanics and how, like, at the quantum level, it's all about fields and repulsions and negativities, and space is mostly empty and it's somewhat positively charged. For me, I think it's interesting and fascinating. I also think, like, again, practically, this pays out, this cashes out, because it shows how being drawn to the other can actually be additive and actually constitutive to something that is a non-relation or a non-community, like a universal non-belonging. Like, we are coming here, we are positively here, we're appearing to each other, but we're also here around a lack. Like, we're here around thinking, and we're trying to think things we don't already know. Because, like, if we were just here to talk about stuff we already knew, that wouldn't be fun. I wouldn't fucking be here.
You know what's coming to mind for me, Nance, is because I remember we're going years back, but I remember there was a part in Baudrillard's In the Shadow of the Silent Majority that was important for you, where he was talking about grounding. You remember that? And I mean, isn't that like, wouldn't a full-on positive sexual relation in this Lacanian sense, wouldn't it just be a grounding where it's like, no, the negativity, the non in the non-relation is what makes any kind of relation possible?
Yeah. It's like, that's why playing in a ball pit is so fun, because there's so much negative space. Like, it's a pit and it's filled with little molecular objects. But if you dove into a slab of concrete, you wouldn't go anywhere. But if you dive into a ball pit, there's all this freedom of range of movement, but it modulates. You're able to do new things because it changes your buoyancy, and it gives you a new space in which to exist. So pure positivity is you're totally frozen.
Over excessive positivity is quicksand.
Yeah.
You get locked in it, and how are you gonna move? Like,
the more you move, the more you sink, the more you struggle and suffer and die.
Exactly. And so, yeah, I think. Okay, sorry.
It's in the lacunae between, and it's how we're drawn, and the temptation to become overly fascinated with the place to which you functionally belong, and therefore develop an identity as either I'm an American. Either I endorse America or I'm an anti-American. Like, those are these two types that I can be. But so what? Who gives a shit? Where the rubber really hits the road is being drawn to the other, and actually trying to draw something out of myself and make a connection, bridge the gap, as you were saying, be the spark.
Yeah, I mean, Dimitri, I think there's one thing that Slavoj does at one point in the book that has always resonated with me. He even talks about it in one of I think it was the movie Žižek ! Where he talks about this. But one of the parallax gaps or parallax views that he talks about is this, and I think this is a great way to bring the concept into a way that's more accessible to people. It's less abstract. So here's where you can look at the same object, and it's object in a negative sense, right? It's like, that's why he uses objet petit a. So objet petit a is not any concrete material object. It's the ultimate negative object of desire. And so that's why you can never get it, because it's not really an object at all. But as far as your concrete material existence goes, your being in the world, this is the most important object for you. It's what you're chasing and pursuing through all concrete objects. But this gap itself, this negativity, is super crucial in one case where, look, on the one hand, we can view ourselves as these beings that have inner experiences and rich subjective lives and personal identities that have everything to do with our connections to other people and the things that matter to us. We can view ourselves as persons, right? On the other hand, we can go, yeah, but all of that is this brain, this chunk of matter. And so the thing is, it's like, okay, if you do like in the movie Hannibal, and you take the top part of my skull off and you have my brain here, and I'm going, this is me. Slavoj would say that's what we can't do. We cannot, there's always going to be a gap between this chunk of gray matter and the richness of our personhoods, our subjectivities. And this is one of these gaps. We just can't truly bring ourselves to think that we are just this lump of gray matter, even though we know without that gray matter, there is no us. So I think this is a way of thinking about this moment of irreconcilability, where yes, we're beings, we're personalities with inner lives and all that. We're also a chunk of gray matter. How do we reconcile that? Well, we can't, but there is a way for us to relate in this non-relation by all of us facing that. Like the stubborn objectivity here is that we're stuck with this gap. And that is, even though it's a negative thing, that is what is crucial to this thing between the brain and the person, even though technically they're the same thing. The point is, we can never reach a neutral spot where it's all synthesized nice and neat. We go, oh, there's the real neutral object. No. To understand this thing called human subjectivity is to dwell in this irreconcilable gap between the subject and the brain.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's a super good way to put it. Another example, I think, would be this pop science or physicist take that shows you how big the cosmos is or how big the stars are, and it always gets bigger and bigger and bigger, right? We all know those videos. And then at the end of it, it's always like, oh, you are so insignificant. And actually, that is good news. So they always have to add that it's good news somehow. But then the naive question to ask here, but you're insignificant to what? And the Lacanian answer would be to the big other, of course. To the big other. That is really, again, it's presenting itself as neutral. Look, it's just about nature, and nature is big, nature is humongous. But this status of nature is actually has a conceptual and unconscious status that has a function, namely the function of the big other, right? To provide a consistent, meaningful background that you can place yourself in as a so-called insignificant subject, right? So subject and object, very complicated, abstract philosophical terms. I'm gonna make it very simple to you guys and the viewers here. So just turn this noun into a verb. What does the subject do? It subjects itself. In what way? It submits voluntarily. Then what does the object do? Object A, also very weird, strange term. It objects. So subject subjects, object objects. The subject subjects itself to maybe a perverted community. Then the object in this community, objectivity, as you said, which is, as Žižek says in the parallax view, like the pure parallax itself. That's the obstacle, right? It objects, so it makes it impossible for you to come to a place that you are really like inside of that community, like actually deeply submerged, right? Like I think actually addiction works the same way. Like you like to tell yourself, oh, when I'm drunk, I like myself, or when I'm high, I'm really enjoying. But it's always when you actually go into the experience that there's always something nagging. Like it's never that you're at the point that you're like 100% high. And the big joke I would say is that as soon as you're there, you're not there. Like if you're 100% high, there's literally no one to perceive that anymore. Like you're literally like in a K-hole, for example, something like this, right? So yeah, Nance, I also really like what you said about thinking, and what we're doing here. I think that the truest thinking is always a thinking that is done in anxiety, not to get rid of anxiety, but really in anxiety. And that means that thinking is also stumbling. Like real thinking is stumbling. Real thinking is not eloquent. When someone's too eloquent, you have to become a little bit suspicious about what is really beneath that eloquence and what's the anxiety grounding that eloquence. And or elegance is also a good one. And so I also like, Nance, what you said about the spark. And I think Zizek also has a concept for this, the short circuit. So we have these realities that don't meet, as Mikey, you just gave the example of like biophysical reality, the gray matter of our brain. We can analyze that stuff, and then on the other hand, we have our subjective experience. And yeah, whenever we get a brain image, like an MRI scan, it's never like, oh yeah, that's really what I was feeling, or something like that. That's
right. Like if somebody
never
was
what
to,
we
like,
get.
if you were talking about how much you love a person and they were to take an image of your brain and you were to see it and go,
Yeah.
oh yeah, that's what my love looks like.
Yeah. But I think what the parallax does is, or what Zizek's philosophy does, is dialectical materialism. It does short circuit these two incommensurable reality, and shows that they're actually part of the same, or part would not be right, but like they inhere in the same negative intersection. They're two sides of the same Mobius loop,
Yes.
to put it like this. And to give another, to continue with this example of the cosmos and how grand and big the cosmos is, to a physicist this might seem not only beautiful but sublime, like dauntingly, overwhelmingly beautiful, right? The stars and all of this. To a sex addict, it's just excremental. Like this, it's just the sex addict wants to see the subliminality of the sex life, and just keep going through the obscene motions there. But then so this is what I'm trying to say, is that there's this parallax, that what's sublime for you is excremental to me, and vice versa, right? So this is another way that we can see, okay, reality is never neutral to us. We're implicated as desiring subjects, which has to deal with this object that objects to it, which is frustration, disruption, nagging, glitching, bugging. And this really happens on, like, there's some oscillation here of sublime to excremental and back. And so another thing, I'm curious what you guys think about this, because there's this big, I would say, Žižekian dictum, that, or motto, to go from desire to drive, right?
Mhm.
You go from desire to drive. And I think that a way to translate it or rephrase it would be to go from sublime to excremental. So to actually go into the subliminality of maybe a perverted sex life, or whatever, like some scientific obsession or some fixation. But to see the point of that is its excrementalization. So I'll give a personal example here before I'll give it back to you guys. So I made this list of my main writings that I wrote, my articles that I've been writing since 2002. And when I finished making that list, I was horrified. I thought, oh God, these titles are all bad. Like they all suck. So it was like it was all as soon as I finished making that stupid little list, I thought to myself, "Oh God, it's all shit." And I think that's actually I would say that's the measure of a success of a project. Like if you look back at a project and it has become shit to you, that means you're ready to keep on working on the next project. But if you would say there's some artists who actually go through these experiences that they are like, oh, now I created my hit single or my best album and I can never get better, and they would just stay fixated on that creation. They haven't properly gone through the process of going from sublime to excremental, so they're staying in this nostalgic desiring mode, which is melancholic, and trying to cling on to a lost object instead of excrementalizing it. So another, I think what the parallax does, it's a laxation. It's a laxation product, like we get to shit because of it. So I'm very grateful for for Žižek because of this.
I love that.
Yeah.
All right, I have a couple things to add to this, but Nance, why don't you respond first before I launch into this?
I mean, so on that, from the sublime to the excrement, I mean, to me, I can't not think the solar anus, the sun
Nice.
representing the sublime. The anus is from where we excrete. But I also think, I think it's I don't know, traversing the fantasy in this way. Like we fall in love with our idea of what we want. And if you can't at some point learn how to be disgusted with what you've got, then you'll be frozen. I think again, like it's another point of freedom. Moving from desire to drive. I don't know, because what drive is such a big word, and desire is also such a big word. So I don't know if I would.
And then they're also in a parallax, which is even worse, right? It's always a parallax.
Yeah, but I don't know. I think just to reduce it, like, that is what we do. Like we have to, I don't know, fall in love with a thing and then become disgusted with, maybe not disgusted with a thing, but maybe less infatuated with the thing. And if it's worthwhile, if it adds value, and not exchange value or use value, but like real human value, then maybe you'll be less infatuated with it, but it'll stick around for other reasons, other more satisfyingly dissatisfying. But yeah, you can never get if you think that you've got the thing that you want, then you're mistaken, my friend, and you're masturbating. And that's not the world I want to live in. Masturbation is fine from time to time, but the Gooner accelerationism is pure nihilism, and that would be just kind of the real end of history. Nothing would happen anymore. So sometimes it's fun to take a shit and maybe build little sandcastles out of it, but always hope for bigger and better shits, I guess.
Bigger and better shit.
So on that note, okay, so I think, look, the object of the parallax view, and I think you rightfully point this out, Dimitri, is the non-orientable object, the Mobius strip. And it's this idea that, look, if you don't know what a Mobius strip is, go Google it. What you'll find is that it's a service that appears to have two sides, but in reality, it's all one and the same side. Now there's a gap, there's a parallax gap when you view the Mobius strip. You really can view it as having two sides. But with a simple shift in perspective, you realize, wait, but it's really one side. But if you shift back to the other perspective, no, there's two sides, because if I grab a Mobius strip and pinch one spot of it, well, there's two sides to this spot. And so much of what Lacan and Hegel and Žižek have all been getting at is this Mobius strip type of ontology. And you'll find it time and time again. So look, the desiring subject and objet petit a are a non-orientable object. They're and it's a parallax view. Because so look, when you view us, and it's easier to at first, okay, you know you're a desiring subject, you want things. And so most people hear that and go, well, yeah, I can relate to desiring. And you say, okay, well, what is it that you really desire? And they'll start naming stuff. And you're like, would that really fulfill you? Would you never, if you got all that, would you never desire beyond that point ever again? And they have some hunch. They know on some gut level, no, I'd end up wanting other shit. And so the question is, okay, so what are you ultimately chasing? What do you really, really want? And this is where Lacan, his theory of desire, comes into play. And for Lacan, when you're a child, when you accept prohibition, when you enter the socialization process, there is this fundamental sense that you have to give up a part of yourself in order to enter society, to become a functioning member of the social order. And you don't know what this part of yourself is that you're giving up, but you know you have to give it up. Now, the funny thing is, you don't actually give up anything. But nonetheless, part of entering the socialization process is this sense of, I'm giving up part of myself, whatever that is. Well, that part of ourselves, that chunk of our lost being that haunts us the rest of our lives, that's the real object of desire. That's the object cause of desire. It's the object you gave up initially that causes you to desire at all, right? The problem is, it's not a real object. You can never get this back because you never had it to begin with. But your whole subjective life, your whole existence in the world is structured around this negative virtual object that Lacan calls objet petit a. And there is this sense where, to truly understand what's going on with a human being at the ontological level, you have to understand the human as, I'll just draw it real quick. Nice to have a notepad. That, oh, damn it, that doesn't look right. Hold on. Okay. This is what we are. We'll see it there. Okay. There's a barred S, there's a little diamond shape, and then there's a little A. And you as a desiring subject are represented by this little S with the bar in it, and it's struck through because you're lacking, you're not complete, you're missing something. What are you lacking or missing? The little A over here, that little chunk of your being, of your existence, your the fullness of your ontological plenitude that you never really had to begin with, but you retroactively take yourself to have given up in order to be a social subject, right? That's what causes you to desire, is this sense of losing this. And that's what you're constantly chasing in the empirical objects that you think will make you happy, that'll satisfy you. Fantasy is this right here. This diamond shape represents the story, the narrative that you concoct in your fantasy space that tells you what you have to do in order to get this back, right? Now, here's the parallax gap. You have to come to see that it's not like you're over here, this is just really you, and then this other thing, oh, well, I got to get this. No, this over here doesn't exist. It's just an external reification of yourself. This is you, this whole thing. You got to, but you can never view yourself all at once as both this object that you think completes you, and as the sense of loss of this object. And that is where subjectivity itself, as such, is this parallax gap, or is a non-orientable object. If you view human beings in one way, they look like a desiring subject. If you view them in another way, they look like some chunk of lost jouissance, lost enjoyment that they can never attain. And the point is to come to see, oh, they're both at the same time. And that is where you could say that what Žižek's dialectical materialism is a metaphysics or an ontology of non-orientableness, or if we just say non-orientable surfaces. But thing is, there's other parallax gaps or non-orientable surfaces that we encounter. Now, this is my own thing, Dimitri, but I think Slavoj, if he heard it, would agree, but I've never seen him explicitly do this. The big other and the superego are the non-orientable object of the law. That, on the one hand, you can view the law as this, as being personified by the big other, which is trying to instruct us in the proper ways of behaving. One does this. This is not that, what they say, you're supposed to do this. This is what one does, right? Okay, it's trying to teach us in how to be a proper model citizen, so to speak. On the other hand, there's this other personification of the law, which is this cruel, frustrated, never happy, can't please, and it's constantly going, be fucking happy, get it fucking right, you're failing, why aren't you doing your best, come on, what's wrong with you? And the point is, both of them are the law in this non-orient, like, on the one hand, there's this distinction to be made. There is a gap between superego and big other. On another level, they're the same surface. So within the symbolic order itself, you can see how the symbolic itself is a non-orientable surface, which is why we have this strange and this parallactic view of the law. That's why we struggle with authority so much. On the one hand, we think authority is there to guide us and help us and make our lives better. On the other, it's this relentlessly judgmental thing that just nothing we do is ever good enough. And it's almost like if we wanted a neutral object, it'd almost be like, okay, it has to be one or the other. Even if it's the superego, that's just make it neutral where I know what I'm dealing with, right? And that's what's so, that's why we're constantly struggling with our relationships to authority, is because no matter how much we try, it's one or the other. You can't get to the neutral authority. It's either this one that's looking over you, trying to give you instructions on how to be good and blah, 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 or it's this cruel, torturous pervert. And both of them are at the heart of the law always already. So I see this as an extension of that.
Yeah, that's super well put. And what I take from Lano Dollar in his book The Voice and Nothing More on the superego and the big other and their difference is that superego is on the side of the law as it is written, whereas superego is on the side of the voice. So
Definitely.
and I've, like, being at uni, I do remember a certain class that I had, which was about the theory of pragmatics. So in cognitive linguistics, there is pragmatics, which is trying to think basically like not like just syntax or grammar or phonology or sounds, but really trying to think things like speech acts, like with Searle and these types. But anyway, I vividly remember from my classes how the teacher who gave it, he was oftentimes very sadistic, and like he would laugh when people had the answer wrong. Like he would just laugh. And then he would always say, "Oh, but I don't mean it that way." Well, then why the fuck did you laugh? But that's the obscene part, right? And I think another thing with like the big other presents itself as neutral, like this is the way that we have established things to be, and then the super is all ego. It's kind of confronting you with the partiality of it, but you can't escape it, right? Because you're sitting there in class, he's laughing at you, like you're wrong, like you are wrong. So yeah,
That's a great point.
yeah, I hated that class so much. God damn it. I'm so glad I'm over with that. And okay, another thing I want to add on the object A. So there's many different guises or embodiments of the object A.
Absolutely.
We can list them. Yeah, so there's the voice. There's also shit, like that stuff you produce in the toilet. There's also whatever. I think we should include Hans, because Hans have a kind of, also inspired by Darien Leader. I think he was right to bring in Hans into this conversation. But yeah, there's different ones, and what the point here is, it relates to the non-relationship. So we're never actually dealing with a person, like a real person. The real person doesn't exist. We're always dealing with either a voice, or maybe like an impersonal writing, but or the gaze, right? The eyes, like the way that people look at us. And object A, there's a subliminality to it. Like we can be enamored by a voice, or we can be enamored by a gaze, but at the same time, it might also petrify and terrify us, right? But I think what dialectical materialism does with the object A, and by the way, I think Nadendollar is like, what he does in A Voice and Nothing More is absolutely brilliant. What he does is that there's this procedure that it enacts, that it goes, like it allows itself to be enamored by the object A, but then it turns around and sees that this kind of desire to get to the meaning of object A has its culmination in the short circuit that the big other does not exist. So, for example, with the voice again, right? Like the voice, someone might have a beautiful voice, or someone might have a squeaky voice, but there's something very strange about, or like take music. Music is like, I really love music, and I can listen to the same song on repeat for way too long. And so what's the object A and music? I think it's a good way to explain it. There's two ways we can look at it, talking about the parallax. So Jacques-Alain Miller says, we listen to music to stamp out the object A, right? Like to get out of anxiety. Like we don't want to hear the crazy squeaky voices of everyone. So in public transport, we put on our headphones. We show, look, I don't want to talk to anyone. I'm just gonna listen to my hip hop. And so stamping out object A, getting out of that possible anxiety that you might experience. But then Žižek adds, I think it was Žižek, but I think he adds this, that there's a truth to this, but at the same time, object A returns in music. So then in music itself, you're like the object of desire just in here. So you might listen to the same song all the time, and this becomes then a fixation, right? So your desire is kind of linked and stuck into this. So the truth of music and the truth of the voice, as Nadendollar puts it, spoiler alert, is real silence. So in musical, I have a certain thing with hip hop that, there's these arrhythmic flows, right? When there's a beat and the rapper is so good that he can actually have a flow that doesn't, like, it just does not sync up to the beat. To me, that's like I always love those type of things when rappers do that, because it keeps showing the kind of the parallax of the beat and the rapper. And what you get to hear in that is really the coffee without cream, or what's in the thing, what's in the thing by not being a thing, right? Like Mike, you also said it. It's not only about what something is, but it is also what it is not. And that's what we get to hear in the arrhythmic flows of rappers with these beats. And that's what I would qualify as real silence. Or like, I also like house music. There's these moments in house music where there's just a super long silence that is unexpected, and those are always like super cool and beautiful to hear. And also, like, in a way, anxiety provoking, because you're like trying to listen for something and there's actually nothing there, but it's still as if there's something, there's a specter that kind of reverberates. So these are ways we can understand real silence. Another way would be in what's the point of having a conversation? It's real silence. Like, is the point at which you are like unable to speak without stumbling. Like, you cannot keep on speaking eloquently, you have to stumble, and then like you might actually realize the shit that you're saying is everything to do with you, nothing with whatever you think that you're talking about, right? So again, yeah, substance presents itself as neutral. Real silence shows that substance reverberates as this self-related negativity, namely the subject. Yeah.
That's great. I mean, I love this idea. The lard, the moment of silence is this moment of the real. And what's important about that is conversationally, right? When you hit this moment where something is unsymbolizable, it's actually the most significant moment. And, so this is where you see, like, yeah, just because something's negative or inarticulable doesn't mean it doesn't have weight in your life. In fact, it might have more significance than many of the things spoken. So I think that's a great thing, because you would say, well, there's a gap between speaking and silence, but there's also a way to make them into a non-orientable object of, I don't know, I want to say significance, or that which bears upon us, something like that, while maintaining this gap where you're like, well, but you can never say silence is spoken word. Like, you can't ever reconcile them. But yeah, I can see how there's a parallax gap there as well.
It's like Han Solo when Princess Leia says, I love you. And rather than, responding with, I love you too, like he says, I know. I think his I know is a form of silence. Like,
it is.
Rather than
really
saying,
is.
rather than saying, I love you as well. Like, his I know is even more powerful because it's a form of silence.
It's also, it's almost like I don't have to say I love you back, because saying I know, which is remaining silent, means I've loved you for so long.
Yeah, like it's by making it conspicuously absent, like he's the full force of it comes through, rather than
I've loved you so long. I've already
it.
been. I've been in this.
Yeah.
So welcome to our love.
Yeah, we can also imagine, like, being in a psychoanalytical session and telling your psychoanalyst, I love you, and then he says, I know, and you don't know if he says, I know because he's been knowing for a long time, or that he just knows because you just told him. And that would be a horrible ambiguity to live through. But I think that's really, like, this kind of short-circuiting, real silence. Yeah, that's a good way to put it, Nance.
It's interesting. So, he ends the book with this famous thing called Bartleby politics, which, is encapsulated in I would prefer not to, which, if you read Herman Melville's story about Bartleby, Bartleby is this guy, he goes around telling everybody at his job, I would prefer not to. And nobody really knows how to deal with him in the story. But, people have debated, like, well, what is Slavoj really getting at with this? I think everything we've said in this conversation leads up to explaining what I would prefer not to really means in the strict Žižekian sense, right? So this whole book's about these parallax gaps, these irreconcilable divisions within a thing. How the thing is self-repelling intrinsically. It's a hold hole. It's at odds with itself. But there's a way where somebody could get stuck on the two sides of the gap. And the Žižekian thing is, you got to see it as a whole. Like, you have to see how each one is implicated in the other to be able to really see the gap for what it is. So on the one hand, it's not a synthesis, because it doesn't repair the gap. It doesn't smooth it out. Oh, it's really just one substantial thing. No, it's seeing how these two ways of seeing something that are completely at odds with each other still are true of this object that you can never get a neutral take on. So look, here's where, like, political import comes into play. So in the section at the end on Bartleby politics, he starts doing this analysis of power and resistance. And typically when you look at society, and this can piss off certain leftist types when they hear this, but I think it's right. So you typically think about the power structure. It's the elite, it's those in positions of power, it's the government, it's the capitalists, right? It's the people who control mass media. And you go, okay, that's power. And then you start seeing protesters on the street holding up signs, protesting, trying to go against power, etc. And you go, well, okay, that's resistance. Well, it's very easy to go, these are not the same thing. These are, one is power, one is resistance. They are what they are. They're fighting against each other, though. And the Žižekian move that he thinks Bartleby embodies is this, oh, wait, they're the same thing. That the ways in which we resist power actually feed into this circuit, and they're two sides of the same coin, or two sides of the same non-orientable surface, and that our modes of resistance actually don't resist power, but instead, to use Baudrillardian languages, simulate resistance. So if you take the side of power, or if you take the side of resistance, ultimately you're siding with the same object, the same system. And what Bartleby does is say, no fucking thanks to both sides. I would prefer not to. And what this means from a Lacanian perspective is there's a lot of jouissance to be had in our inherently transgressive forms of enjoyment, which is to say, forms of resistance that have actually been assimilated into the system and don't actually pose any meaningful threat to the reproduction of that system. But nonetheless, it's enjoyable to have, a rebellious outburst and throw a brick through a window or whatever. That's just the cliche, act, but I'm using it just to
Yeah, or
the
like
point.
make like leftist reels on Instagram and TikTok, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And
all
so
these things.
the Bartleby insight and what it means to prefer not to is to go, I'm not playing into the either side of the gap. I don't know what the answer is, but I'm withdrawing myself from the circuit of this gap, because now, even though it's abundantly clear that there's a gap between power and resistance, I also, thanks to dialectical thinking, know that they're both on the same non-orientable surface. Because of that, I'm rejecting both sides. And that is this politics of withdrawal. Now, obviously, people can, activist types could, what are you saying? We just do nothing? Well, Slavoj has said, sometimes the most revolutionary thing is doing nothing. But I just wanted to bring this up because I think this is where like the politics of the book comes out of the gap, the theory of the parallax gap, where it's like, sometimes you have to realize, like, you taking an oppositional stance to something can actually help reproduce the very thing that you're taking a stance, a position against. And parallactic dialectics can help you sort through this and go, wait, am I actually helping the very power structure that I want to resist? If I am, then how do I withdraw from this in a way that could actually do something to, or lead to something that could meaningfully resist power? So, yeah, I'd love to know what both of you think of that.
The call is coming from inside the house. I think, traditional attitudes toward politics tend to fall into people confusing the particular for the universal, or people getting confused with like their immediate experience for the universal experience, and then wanting to take a stand or engage in some action that will improve their immediate surroundings. So like already that is I think a way to escape the moralism that a lot of people will do. Either, oh, the left is evil and they want to corrupt our children, or, oh, the right is evil and they want to kill us and take away all our rights. like I think seeing the antagonism and understanding that it's this complex. Like we are all in little complexes. We're all systems that make up this global meta system. And we all have this tendency to fall into the solipsism and think that's the most important thing. While things can be important, they can never be the most important thing. And like that's the point of politics. There is no most important thing. And in fact, the only thing that's important is there cannot be a most important thing. Like that's freedom. That's human freedom. That's like if we ever figure it out, it will be because we all onboard the fact that it can never be figured out. So like that is this deadlock. That's this ultimate contradiction. There is no answer to the question. So achieving that moment or arriving at that moment of being unable to untie the Gordian knot, and rather than, Alexander's not coming to cut it with his sword and like, no, that's not going to happen. It's up to you. Withdrawal. And that's a tricky thing too. Cause like if you just withdraw, if you just dive into, your own little reproduction, your own simulation of a new world. Like we're also not going to have a new world. I can't withdraw into my family, because we're not free until we're all free. So if I say politics doesn't matter, theory doesn't matter, it doesn't matter. All I have to do is be a good father and be a good partner. I do have to be a good father. I do have to be a good partner. But in order to live up to like this ethical attunement, I also have to still care about the outside world. So like, it's like, yeah, we arrive at this like intractable thing, this ongoing, unfolding contradiction. So it is doing nothing. It is a withdrawal. I'm not out protesting. I'm not out throwing bricks. I'm not making reels on TikTok and Instagram and shit like that. But I'm trying to find ways where I can be effective and efficacious and do something that actually matters ethically, that actually matters in a real way.
So what he thinks that we withdraw into is almost like a pure negativity, a negation of the whole system as a whole. Now that doesn't mean that comes with any like concrete praxis, but what it is almost an existential disposition towards the actually existing system as a whole. And because you've lost faith in the whole cybernetic structure of the system, both resistance and power, to be withdrawn into a kind of disposition of negativity is for him to actually, it's the courage of hopelessness. It is to stand open to some future where this whole system has been replaced. So, Dimitri, what do you think of this, how this Bartleby politics sounds?
Yeah, so I completely agree with it. I think in the history of philosophy we've seen the denigration of metaphysics with Immanuel Kant. Then we also saw the denigration of German idealism with the materialist revenge, culminating in dialectical materialism with Marx, and psychoanalysis has also denigrated philosophy. What that means to me is simply that if you're not doing psychoanalysis when you're doing philosophy, most likely I will not be super interested in it for a very long time. I think really like to see the truth of philosophy, you have to do psychoanalysis. You have to see that, it's about libidinal economy. Yeah, it's about sexuality. There's no innocence. There's no Neoplatonic innocence of ascending to the one. No, that's over. That's really all over. So Marx and Freud, class and sex. How do we bring these two together? Because leftists oftentimes, as I also pointed out at the beginning, they lots of times really do not like psychoanalysis, right? And I think the left has, I think it's safe to say, totally failed on the question of sexuality and of sexual difference. And that's why the right has actually been able to pick it up, right? By saying, okay, guys, you think sexuality is confusing, you don't know what a woman is? Well, we do. A woman is this Procrustean thing, above which is the man, and underneath her is the child, by the way. So we're going to solve the birth rate problem. And then you're like, okay, well, at least someone is talking about it. And when you see what are these same guys saying about capital, it's nothing. So the right wing structurally obfuscates the issue of global capitalism and the fact that if we really want to confront this problem head on, we cannot stay in the confines of the nation state. It's an internationalist problem, it's a global problem, and that's exactly what Marx proved. So we have this parallax, right? Like in a way, the fantasy, my fantasy would be that I would like get like a time machine and go to Freud's time, and I would put him in the time machine and then go back to Marx and say, stop being so impatient. Just read some of this, dude, and let's do this project together, guys. Right? But this is I'm saying this ridiculous fantasy just to show that whatever way that we are thinking about unifying leftist political movements that think about capital and psychoanalytic movements that take sexuality seriously, that do not posit another symmetry, which is inherently right wing in a way. Like even if like there's this thing also about it's inherently right wing, I would say, because it is inherently perverted. Only if you see the sexual relationship as asymmetrical are you really not like are you really hystericizing the fusional fantasy of there being a symmetry between man and woman and sexuation. So the left won't just pick up psychoanalysis. Of course it won't. And it's not that like psychoanalysis will be like revitalized and then the leftists will see, oh, of course, this is what we missed out on, guys. We have to think class and sex together. But who are picking up Marx and Freud and, you know, the issue of class and sexuality? That's today's contemporary philosophers. That's us. Like, that's what we have to do. That is, to speak for we, that's our ethico-political stance. Like, we are not gonna compromise on this, right? Like, and it's so clear to me, if you deal with a leftist who does not want to go into psychoanalysis, or even if you deal with like philosophers who don't want to ignore the issues of capital and of sexuality, or psychoanalysis that is simply bourgeois and does not go into the problems of capital, and it's just on this level of, oh, let's just do psychoanalysis. Like, I don't know how much they pay nowadays for a session, but it's not a model that's a political intervention that is like feasible and plausible to us here and now. Well, this is a kind of parallax that we are in, and this is a kind of ethico-political stance that we are in. So yeah, I originally came to philosophy because of politics, and I came to politics because this post-Soviet neoliberal era was just so unsatisfactory to me. Like, I wanted to live for a cause. I didn't know what that meant when I was like a teenager or stuff like this, but I wanted to live for a cause. And there's something, how do I say, like megalomaniacal about this. Like, there's some greatness about thinking like, okay, I'm gonna live for a cause, right? And then people always want to like put you down and say, oh, well, it's not about the cause, there's nothing there, don't go into these political movements, like you can't even change it, it's just change your own personal problems. That was never enough for me, and that's how I ended up in philosophy. So yeah, living for a cause. But what cause is this? Well, it's the cause with a capital C. So it's the object cause of desire. It's the cause as the subject itself, as the disturbance of determinism, right? Like things, the future is not okay. Like the future is in a way determined, but if we change the past, we change the future, right? So that's also the big Kantian revolution about freedom, that freedom is neither phenomenal nor noumenal. So freedom is not in the appearances, but freedom is also not in what would be exempt from those appearances. It's the freedom of the self-positing subject. And honestly, guys, it's such a privilege to to be in a space that I get to live this and like be invited to your podcast. And like we are in these interstices of communities, right? We are living this ethical political stance. And yeah, that's, to me, that's also Lacanian ethics, like not compromising our desire, not just saying, oh, well, like philosophy, what can it really achieve politically? No, like doing philosophy, that's the political intervention. Yeah.
I mean, look, I love that you're emphasizing this. This is something I believe wholeheartedly. And obviously, there's a lot of political theorists that don't see this, but I don't think you can do political theory without libidinal economy. And I think this is something, look, other thinkers, I'm not saying, like, Žižek does this with the best of them. Like, and I think he's my favorite at doing this kind of thing, he and Todd. But I got to give credit where, like, Deleuze and Guattari understood like this connection between the political and the libidinal in their own way. Lyotard did with his book Libidinal Economy, right, which is all about Marxism and politics and all of that. Herbert Marcuse was tapped it. So there's a line of thinkers that I feel like, even though I'm more Žižekian than I am any of the other ones, I feel an indebtedness to this whole line of thought where I can't approach politics without having psychoanalysis in mind. And I almost, like, Todd always gives me shit because he knows that I like making neologisms, and he's about as against it as anybody. But I almost think like we haven't fused political economy and libidinal economy together enough. And it's almost like, do we just have to talk about like polybidinal, just combine and make a term, and it's funny because poll on Reddit, right? But I almost think like, yeah, there needs to be some sort of neologism that just fuses them together, where anytime we start talking politics, the libidinal is connoted, and whenever we're talking libidinal economy, politics is connoted. I think that needs to be something that we find a way to talk about. But this has been great. I want to give you guys, times to, say what you want to say in closing. Nance, why don't you go, and then Dimitri, you can close us out.
Yeah, I think I don't know, maybe just to reiterate my opening. The world is a mad and maddening place, and it seems to continue spinning out of control. And from my perspective, at least, it feels like we are becoming disempowered more and more, and that's compounding. We're all being isolated, and we're dropping off into our little hypercubes and just becoming like little nodes in a vast global network that metabolizes so much energy, and like there's so much happening, but the world just keeps getting worse. The world keeps getting more inhospitable to us, and isn't that fucked up? Like, this is our home, this is where we live, and we're all sharing this space. It's a finite planet. We have to figure out some kind of way to deal with that. Like, we are all individuals. We all have needs, hopes, desires, wants, dreams, fears, and all these things are necessarily not incompatible, but it's not a one-to-one. There will never be a one-to-one. There is no absolute relation. We're not complementary to each other. Nevertheless, we have to figure out a way to deal with those intractable differences, and also not get bogged down by the weight. Like, it's so compelling to be the penguin and to fuck off to the mountains. Because what's over on the other side of the mountain? Well, little penguin, you're going to get eaten by a saber-toothed tiger. I don't know. Resistance, praxis, whatever, I think can only be done by thinking, and thinking can only be done collectively. And yeah, I don't know. Like, that's I don't know. There's also a part of me that I just want to like get really, really, really stoned and lay on a beach somewhere and just like I had a dream the other night. You know how like you never die in your dreams? I had a dream where I lay down and said, I'm so tired, and I died. And like I zoomed out and I kind of saw myself laying there dead, and it was pleasant. Like I woke up feeling good about it.
Like finally that's over.
Yeah. Don't give in to that desire, because I think for me anyway, that represents a desire. And that can only be done, I think, in this collective mode of trying to come together and trying to celebrate our lack, thinking and stumbling together, and like coming together and coming to the potlatch with an empty bowl, and nevertheless still arriving and doing that. So I don't know.
That's great. Dimitri?
Yeah, so yeah, I want to emphasize the urgency of the work that we're doing, and not the hyperactive urgency of trying to get as much leftist reels out and looking at the numbers skyrocket and, oh guys, the revolution is on the horizon, but the urgency of cultivating this ethico-political stance in ourselves, this parallactic stance, like we are the parallax, each one of us, and developing it together. So that's the type of that is a type of urgency that's really needed in this work, and the urgency of that is really also the anxiety of thought again, the anxiety of being a subject and being sexed, being being sexed in the sense of not having being unable to find a supplemental object or that can complement you, that can finally give you meaning or something like this. And it's not that war is on the horizon or that the revolution is on the horizon, but we're already at war, and every time peace is posited, that's a fiction. So this is also that urgency, but this piece, that's a fiction. Sometimes war is a fiction too, and I would say that war is a fiction in what sense? Well, it's in the problems that are presented to us that are not really problems. So I think really this urgency is also to think like, what are the real problems that we're dealing with? And here it's in a way it's very simple. It's class and sex, like politics and sexuality, or libidinal economy. So we just had the first session of the Parallax view a few days ago at Philosophy Portal, and the recording is live. So if you want to get it, you can watch it still. We're gonna have the second session on the 30th of March, and we're gonna take the whole year to dive into the Parallax view patiently and slowly, which is really nice to go slowly at it. And it's open for anyone to join that Philosophy Portal. It's just $5 a month. So thanks again, guys, for inviting me. I think this conversation was really awesome. I hope to talk more about shit with you guys. I think that was a good.
So this has been great, Dimitri. Thank you for coming on and talking. And guys, seriously, if you're interested in Žižek, if you want an introduction to his work, you need to read one of his core texts, and you just can't get a better one than the Parallax View, and you can't get a better place to learn about it than Philosophy Portal with Dimitri. So, we'll have the links in the description if you want to go over there and get involved. And shout out to Cadell. We would love to have you back. I would love to talk to you about Delar's book On the Voice. That would be a fun conversation. So maybe we can do that down the road a bit.
We also we have to talk about sex.
I know, what is sex?
Subject.
We've talked about doing an episode on that. So I don't know, maybe you and Cadell could join us for that, and we could have a fun talk about that classic book too. So
that would be awesome.
Awesome. Well, thanks for being here, Dimitri. This has been great. Everybody, check out what's going on at Philosophy Portal. All right. So guys, is there a way that we could view this whole thing with the Epstein class, with the elites, as a parallax view, a gap? And it seems as a lot of people just act like, oh, these sick, twisted elites up there at that level, and they act like it's this zone that doesn't connect to the rest of our everyday world where we work jobs and we go to grocery stores and we live our lives. I mean, is not the Žižekian task to come to see how our level of reality is implemented structurally in theirs and vice versa? And so, Nance, how would you articulate this?
I mean, I would ask the question: is the accursed share a parallax gap? I don't know, maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but like I think the stuff that's happening at the top is a structural necessity, just the same as the stuff that's happened, like the depravity and all the ills of poverty, those things that are happening down here at the bottom. That's also a structural necessity, and they look very different, because down here at the bottom we have drug abuse, we have gang violence, we have not nihilistic violence, and this seeming explosion of pent up, I don't know, frustration, energy, nihilism, non-belief in anything, and it's exploding. And then there at the very top, it's all extravagant and it's all, you know, it looks different, but it is the same thing. It's an expression of the same thing that we, again, all the shit that's happening on the surface of the planet, it's amazing. It's fascinating. If we could jump on a spaceship and zoom out and just look at all the things that are happening, the material things that are happening, it's very impressive. But also, nothing worthwhile is happening for any of us, for any of the people at the top, for any of the ruling class or any of the workers. We're all just slowly going through the motions, chasing this kind of magical object called a commodity that's supposed to satisfy us, because we have to follow the law, but we also have to find ways to enjoy the commodity and do things that are, you know, transgressive in some ways. So yeah, I think the depravity is an expression of the energy that we build up, like surplus jouissance, even maybe, like because we're not actually satisfied, but we're wasting our lives. Also, capital can keep doing what capital does, continue the churn. So I think it's a structural necessity. The stuff at the top, Epstein, and also the horrible, the rapes that happen on the island and the rapes that happen in bedrooms in the hood. It's the same thing. So we, in order to change, to get rid of the shit that's happening at the top, we would have to find some kind of way to alleviate ourselves of the social ills of poverty, of these oppressive material conditions that are holding us down and forcing us, wage labor, ultimately forcing us into these desperate relations where we make desperate choices, but we're not even, to say it that, like, that's too simplistic. But yeah, the desperation and depravity are one and the same.
Yeah,
Dimitri, yeah, what do you think of? I guess we could call this the Epstein parallax, like
the Epstein
coming
parallax,
to see
yeah.
how, like, what is going on at the lowest level of society actually implicates itself at the top, that you can't have an absolute clear binary opposition between the elites and the normies, that these are two sides of a non-orientable surface. So if we want to get rid of what's going on with the elites, we're going to have a new surface altogether.
Yeah, so I, as I said at the beginning of the conversation, the first big political philosopher, if we want to call it that, was Noam Chomsky, and lo and behold, Noam Chomsky is in the Epstein files. And the other day, I was walking in the bookstore and I saw it was discounted for some reason. Noam Chomsky on Power, and damn, that's a fucking parallax. That was a perspectival shift, seeing this book, Chomsky on Power, and knowing the exchanges he had with Epstein, talking about female hysteria and that it will fade, and at that very moment of of hashtag Me Too, which he saw as a witch hunt, he didn't say anything about it publicly. But privately, he hung out with this crazy pervert Epstein, talking about how that is shitty. And so the other day, I'm studying linguistics, right? And like studying linguistics means studying Chomsky. Like the cognitive linguistics is Chomsky's theory. Yeah. And so, oh man, like the textbooks that I get at my school are written a lot of times by students of Chomsky, and it would like the Syntax of Natural Language is one of the books. At the beginning of the book, it justifies why are we going into universal grammar, this syntactical theory, and it says, well, because we are anti-racist and we want to be against racism, and viewing a language through the lens of like political nation states is a racist thing because you're confining language to the nation, and yeah, we think that there's actually a universal grammar. And in my lectures, I also have a literal student of Chomsky who is my professor, and her first lecture, she started saying, "Oh, and the president of the United States is a narcissist, and this and that." And I was just thinking about like nouns and verbs, like I wanted to learn about that stuff, you know. But I'm not here discrediting. Weirdly enough, I'm not here just cheaply trying to discredit either Chomsky or linguistics. But I did have a conversation with someone, some fellow student, and I told her the same. I said, you know, Chomsky's in the Epstein files, but I'm not moral about it. And she immediately says, no, I am moral about it. And then she added that, well, at the same time, Chomsky can be a very good linguist while also being in the Epstein files. And then I thought, aha, yeah, this is the problem. This is the problem, because here we have to see actually how...
Is that a parallax gap itself?
Yeah, I would say the parallax gap is no. I would say like be amoral and see into the, let's say, the unethical desire of Chomsky, and see how whatever he's doing on a scientific level is actually, I think, like a secondary fiction, also like hiding the cynicism of Chomsky. So there's something deeply cynical about what we're seeing with this kind of this leftist politics that is like that wants to say, oh yeah, this is racism, this is that, but then, you know, Chomsky was using all his stuff to work at MIT, and he's a very, very rich man. And I'm not trying just to discredit Chomsky in a cheap way, but what I am saying is that, like, scientific activity must be grounded in philosophy for it not to become this cynical tool. And also, like, Chomsky's theory of manufacturing consent, which of course we can read in the sense of manufacturing consent on the island.
Yeah, I always have a new meaning after this.
Yeah, for everything we got a new parallactic shift. But so what I am saying is that Chomsky says Lacan is a charlatan. Chomsky does not want to talk to Žižek. And who does Chomsky talk to? Fucking Epstein. What the fuck, man? Like, talk to the dude who's like thinking class and sex together using German idealism and stuff like that. But no, like, I mean, I have lots of critique of Chomsky. And at the same time, I do have a certain love for him. But yeah, Chomsky is definitely in a pre-Kantian paradigm. That's what his science is in. And German idealism doesn't allow for that, and yeah, also psychoanalysis and Marxism. So I think leftist theories which do not take into account libidinal economy on the level of psychoanalysis tend to become cynical in this front. And that's, I think, something that Chomsky unfortunately fell prey to, and this is visible with his relationship with Epstein. So yeah, it's a bit painful. It was a bit strange to see, like, this man, someone you admire, and then you see him in this way.
Yeah.
I
guess I'll say Epstein parallax. I would prefer not to.
Yeah. Read Inventing Reality by Michael Parenti. It's same thing as
that's reading Parenti is the politics of withdrawal at this.
Yeah, read Parenti instead of Chomsky.
Yeah. All right, thanks, guys.
Nice.